All right, today I feel led to share on a scripture that's about the Gerasene demoniac. In this text, we have Jesus, before he has this encounter with this violent man who's living in the tombs, he's with his disciples, and he's in synagogues, and he's in sort of insider territory. He's with kind of the saved, so to speak. And then the text says that he gets in a boat to cross over the other side. And that's what I want to talk about today, is what would it look like for us to get in the boat, to cross over to the other side, into another country. That's been my experience. I grew up in a mainstream suburban context in north of, or just around Seattle. And I never imagined that I would be a chaplain of a jail, let alone go to Honduras and work with outlaws. God's call was totally took me by surprise. When I crossed over my first time, crossed through the doors into the prison, I was expecting to be, I was afraid. I was mainly afraid of white prisoners, white criminals. I was pretty comfortable with Latino criminals because I'd worked with them already. But African American, Native American, white, big white dudes with tattoos and neo-Nazi types and meth cooks, I didn't know what that was going to be about. What I found that as I moved towards the other, as I crossed over, I experienced lots of opposition, just like Jesus did when he crossed over in the boat. Storms that created fear. But this text is really beautiful. Jesus comes to the other side, into the country of the Gerasenes. And it says, when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. Oh no, what's going to happen? But here, there's a surprise right from the start. It said, and he had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him. Well, actually, this isn't a surprise. The surprise is that he doesn't attack Jesus, right? The surprise is that he comes and he actually bows down before Jesus, in spite of the fact that he really is a seriously violent offender. Okay, the scriptures describe him really graphically as having been living among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. Imagine that. He'd often been bound with shackles and chains. So this is a repeat offender for sure. Somebody who the society had tried to punish and hadn't been very successful at punishing, to the point where the chains had been torn apart by him and the shackles broken in pieces. Like, this guy had so much trauma accumulated in his being that his violence was actually increasing as a result of attempts to reform him. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. Okay, this is where we're at, you guys, in America right now. We've got 3 million people in prison. We're sending people away not as the last resort, but as almost like the first resort. And what we're finding is people are coming out of prisons and jails on a daily basis with more trauma, with more resentment, with more debt, with greater levels of difficulty, with the label felon, which makes it almost impossible to get a job, with money that's owed for restitution, for child support, and still with their addictions not really dealt with, okay, because there are very few recovery programs in the prison system. So anyway, this guy is described as constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and gnashing himself with stones. Serious self-harm. So many of the meth users that I've found, it's like such a self-destructive power, that addiction to meth. Methamphetamines, I thought crack cocaine was terrible for the people that I was visiting in the jails, and until meth came on the scene. And meth destroys people's brain cells. People come in, people who I used to know as healthy crack addicts would come in missing teeth, with sores all over their faces. Okay, we have self-harm increasing as a result of our highly educated it should be a highly informed approach. So anyway, this is a guy who's gnashing himself with stones. But here's the beautiful part. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and he bowed down before him. and shouting with a loud voice. He said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" See, in a way, he's attracted to Jesus, but in a way, we see that his image of God has been damaged by his treatment from religious insiders. He says, "I beg you, by God, do not torture me." He's expecting to be tortured because that's been the way he's been treated. He's expecting exclusion. He's expecting to be a nobody in their eyes. He's expecting greater punishment. Jesus had already been addressing the underlying issue, trying to make a separation between the powers of evil that were lurking within him and this man who Jesus saw as made in the image of God as good. Jesus had been telling the unclean spirit to go out of him. And then Jesus asked him his name. Jesus moves in such a personal way because that's who God is in Christ. God knows exactly who we are, but he wants to give us a voice. So we ask him his name, and the man himself does not answer, but the spirits inside him answer. "My name is Legion, for we are many." And then the man began to beg him earnestly not to send them out of the country. I'm not sure why. But there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain, and the demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus then gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. So we see that Jesus gives the demons these destructive powers of, I don't know what their names were individually. The powers that I see hurting the people that I serve they have names like shame, self-hatred, hatred of others, lust, greed, jealousy, debt. And so these powers are very, very powerful. And they were so powerful that as soon as they hit an animal, which was not made in the image of God, the animals couldn't handle it. They self-destructed. The power of evil that had been in this man was too much for 2,000 pigs to handle, and they self-destructed. And the herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened, and they came to Jesus. And they observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, and the very man who had had the legion, and they became frightened. So Jesus was able to do what our criminal justice system hasn't been able to do, and what often we in the church haven't been able to do, make that separation between the invisible powers, the macro and the micro powers that oppress, and the person, and Jesus' criminal justice approach is to punish the invisible offenders and to leave in a state of health and wholeness the human being. Last week I got a call from an inmate in a prison system who, this is a guy I'd known for about 17 years, named Mario, who was from Texas. He had come here. His mother was a farm worker and had moved from Texas to Washington when she was 27 years old with her 3 kids. And they'd moved into an apartment above a bar. And she, as a single mom, had raised her kids, but she'd been out in the fields all the time working cucumber harvest and raspberries, strawberries, cucumbers, cauliflower. And her kids basically sort of raised themselves and ended up getting involved in drugs. Mario joined the Mexican mafia, ended up in prison, and that's when I began to meet him. And anyway, I've accompanied Mario and seen his struggle, just dealing with his addictions, dealing with old habits, old patterns, temptations. So anyway, recently he was sent off to 6 months 6 months ago he was sent off to do a 4-year sentence, and last week his mother died. At age 63. And so Mario's social worker in the prison called me and said, would you be willing to do a funeral service? And so I said, yes, I'd love to. And he says, okay, well, it's going to cost you $750 to pay the guards because they have to bring him shackled to a facility or to wherever your church is, and we need to get approval to see whether your church is a safe site. And so we began this process. So Monday, Mario comes up all in handcuffs and in leg irons, and with these two guards who come into our church, and before they allow him in, they need to go through every single room in our building and check it all out. And there gathered were 3 grandchildren of this woman who died, who the grandmother had raised, because the parents had addictions, and a number of other family members. And it was just such a powerful experience of this man who was being treated as an extremely dangerous person, coming in, and as soon as he sees everybody, he just begins to bawl his eyes out, okay, and just shake and cry, and as family member after family member came and hugged him through his chains, and we were able to do a memorial service, and then our team gathered around the whole family and just prayed prayers of blessing, prayers of peace over the family. And it was just a reminder that of this constant conflict between the demands of our current justice system and just our call as followers of Jesus to be constantly making that distinction, to refuse to look upon people according to their labels and according to their past history of criminality, and to be open to them as brothers, as sisters, to treat them with honor. Last Thursday I was in the jail, and I had the first time experience of 4 guys coming in who all had witnessed their parents die in their arms, okay? The first guy I said, how are you doing? He goes, I've been really having a lot of nightmares about, when my mom shot herself in the head in front of all of us when I was 8 years old. And I was like, whoa, that's serious. And then another guy said, no way, dude, that is too crazy. I came in on my old man when he hung himself. And I was like, okay. And then the third guy said, you guys aren't serious, are you? He goes, my dad invited our whole family over for a barbecue, and when we were all together, he put a gun to his head and shot himself. And then the fourth guy said, I was in Texas when, just 2 months ago, and there was a raid on my house, but it was the wrong house, and my dad freaked out, and he jumped up, and the cops thought he was getting a gun, and they shot him 8 times, and he died in my arms. Okay, so that sort of reoriented my plans for a Bible study. The level of trauma, the level of harm that people have gone through that are in our criminal justice system is extreme, and our approach to dealing with them is making it worse. And I just want to invite you guys to really consider getting into Jesus's boat. Getting out of the boat if you are in the boat of the criminal justice system, getting out of that boat and getting into the boat of Jesus, and taking that risky step of crossing over into this other region, where you will be surprised that these people that have been labeled violent and that are violent and that have harsh backgrounds, you may be surprised at how they will come in great humility and in great longing, and with great openness and hope that, in fact, you will represent a God that doesn't torture them, but a God that knows how to bring healing and knows how to send away the evil things, and then call that person into their true vocation. The end of the story is beautiful because this man wants to follow Jesus, but Jesus says, no, you need to go back to your people, and you need to tell them about the wonderful things that God has done for you. And it says that he does. He becomes this witness, this ex-offender who's been transformed and liberated, becomes a witness to the love of God and the power of God among his people. Right? Thanks.